Thank you, Gani. Well, that was quite an introduction. My son told me the same just before I left home. You're the best, Daddy, but I'm not the best. I'm not the best. It's a pleasure to be here. Again, I realized yesterday it was my fourth Alpha One Global conference. I was the very first time in Dublin. I think it was back in 2004 when Larry Warren had organized a meeting. And then subsequently to that, I was in Rome and Amsterdam. So it's really nice to be back again today. Okay, so I hope I will not give you an overdose of myself this morning because I have 3 talks. Some of the slides you'll see are the same in some of the presentations, but hopefully I'll manage to make different points with each of them in each presentation. So in this first session, we really want to talk about partnerships and stakeholder collaboration. And when I talked to Gani about coming here, we both thought that the example of PLUS, the platform of plasma protein users, would be a very nice way to start the day. So this is what I will be talking about at first. So in this presentation, I'll try to review a little bit the principles of stakeholder collaboration, and then I will give you, as I said, concrete example from PLUS and why I think it's so important that we all work together under this platform. But I'll mention a few other key stakeholder collaboration examples, mostly from the PID community where I'm from, and then some conclusions. So the first thing that one should say about stakeholder collaboration when it comes to healthcare is obviously that patient groups themselves have become really key stakeholders in healthcare decision making. And the role of a patient organization as such, beyond raising awareness on the patient needs and priorities, disseminating information to membership, collecting data, organizing events, is about fostering stakeholder collaboration with other NGOs, with other patient groups, and ultimately to become advocates. Advocates for better access to early diagnosis and care is often a common priority for all of us. And in that role, we come to work with policymakers, civil servants, politicians, and regulators. And it's when we do that, that actually working together really pays off. And I guess the key message of this presentation is on this slide, is that one voice can never be as loud as 10 voices put together. And certainly from the IPOPI's experience, we've seen that our collaboration with our stakeholders in the field of primary immunodeficiencies, which, if you're not aware, groups around 250 disorders that affect the patient's immune system to varying degree, but they are lifelong conditions, and in the most severe cases, they are life-threatening conditions. And certainly working with our stakeholders has enabled us to really develop better advocacy and awareness tools and skills, to have a presence in the policy-making arena, to be represented in key institutions and agencies. So I think increasingly patient advocates are perceived by policymakers and administrations as experts in their own right, because we do bring a very unique perspective to policy debates. And that has really enabled us to make advances in terms of getting better access to treatment, better diagnosis for PID. We've been able to promote platforms to advance PID clinical care and support reference centers as well as registries. And none of this could have really happened without strong stakeholder collaboration. So when it comes to PLUS, PLUS is the platform of plasma protein users. And it groups together the organizations that you can see here on the slide, and you can see that Alpha One Global is the latest member of PLUS. Before that, we worked with Alpha Europe. And you can see that we have some European organizations, but also international organizations, despite the fact that PLUS primarily focuses on Europe. You've got IPOPI, you've got the World Federation of Hemophilia, you've got the ITP support group, obviously Alpha One Global. You also have the European Hemophilia Consortium, the Guillain-Barré and CIDP Foundation International, and the C1 Inhibitor Deficiency International Patient Organization. And basically the commonality between these groups is that they all represent patients that depend on plasma medicinal products for their treatments largely. So we had a meeting in Rome recently where PLUS re-elected the steering committee, and as you can see, my name is there, along with Brian from the hemophilia group and Henrik from the C1 inhibitor. And of course, the message here is that we do have regular elections, and I do hope we get back Alpha-1 on board of the steering committee in the future. Larry Warren was a steering committee member until recently. So the message with PLUS is that until we work together, our political visibility in Europe was not as good. And once we started to work together, things changed. And just to give you a little bit of background why we did that, it's actually all rooted in a political dossier called the Blood Directive, which in Europe is basically the European directive that legislates in the field of blood and plasma products. And when the Blood Directive was launched in the early 2000s, we realized that actually many stakeholders were part of the debates, but not the patients. And we came close to quite a very tricky situation as the blood donor organizations in Europe were really advocating hard to rule out plasma products made from compensated plasma donation, which is really something that is against our viewpoint. And we then therefore decided to get together. And by getting together, obviously, suddenly we were representing a substantial number of European citizens, and that gave us automatically better access to the EU arena, to the point that we now regularly meet with the EU health commissioners, and which is quite a big deal when you deal in health policy in Europe. So we've been meeting with the commissioners for a number of years now regularly, and we've actually established a formal collaboration with the Commission, in as such that if there is a dossier that is going through the Commission and the Parliament, automatically PLUS will be consulted, will have a say in the matter, and will be heard. And you can see this picture with Commissioner Dalli. He's the smaller guy in the middle, but he's actually the important guy, at least back then, since he's no longer health commissioner. And then beyond that, PLUS has been really pivotal in organizing consensus meetings. And these consensus meetings have brought together stakeholders that didn't necessarily really agree, to put it mildly, with each other on very sensitive political issues such as the compensation of plasma donors and access to blood and plasma products. And I can tell you the first meeting was a very interesting meeting, with strong feelings being expressed around the table, but somehow over the years, by putting the patient's interests really at the center of these very tricky political discussions, I think we've made tremendous advances in making sure there is a dialogue going on, and we still don't agree on everything, but that's fine. But at least we talk to each other, and there is a common agreement that ultimately decisions have to be rooted in the fact that patients' interest has to be secured. What came out of these consensus meetings was actually very good publications, and I would invite you, if you haven't read them, to go online and to read them. They are available in different websites. They're certainly available on our website, on the IPOPI website. And these consensus statements really reflect the discussions that were made at these important meetings. And the consensus really, as I said, is that the patient interest has to be primordial in all political discussions around the supply of these medicinal products. So one of the key messages that we've been trying to make as a platform of patient organization, which I think is important for all of us, is represented in this slide, which is that basically blood products and plasma products and blood collection and plasma collections are two very different things. And I always like to show this slide because I think it represents nicely the differences. And you can see that from the donors population, if you go on the side of blood collection, you have a very different process than plasmapheresis just at the moment of collection. There are various steps that are involved in plasmapheresis, including donor screening, look-back procedure, quarantine procedures, and that's quite different from blood collection. The process in itself is much longer as well. And once you've collected the blood, really what you get out of the blood collection is labile components, such as red cells, platelets, that are mostly used in transfusion settings. So they have a very short shelf life. They be used usually within a few days to a month. Whereas the plasma, whether it comes from the blood, having been recovered from the blood collection here, or whether it comes directly from the plasma donors, is then sourced and fractionated. And the fractionation process, which is really the manufacture process, involves several viral safety and inactivation steps. The whole process between the collection and the finished product, so to speak, is about 6 months long. So you end up with medicinal products, with pharmaceutical products that are stable products with long shelf lives that can go up to several years. So all in all, blood and plasma are actually very different from the mode of collection, from the mode of production, but also how they will be used, because blood products are mostly used at the local level, at the country level. And one of our big messages is that plasma products have to travel. It's a global, life-saving, therapeutic product that needs to be made available to the patients that need and rely on it. And this message, though it seems very simple on this slide, is actually a very complex one when it comes to the ethical aspect of compensating donors or not. So if we look a little bit more, again, at plasma-derived medicinal products, we know they are biologicals. We know that today they have excellent viral safety record. We know that there are robust donor selection procedures in place and screening tests, and I've mentioned the sophisticated and long manufacturing process. We also know that a highly regulated field in the pharmaceutical industry, in fact, the most highly regulated field. And compensated plasma donations actually account for most of the plasma being used to make plasma medicinal products. So it's highly important that we have a coexistence of both the voluntary unpaid blood donors and the paid plasma donors, because at the end of the day, it's also a matter of choice for the patients. It's very risky to look at plasma products under the self-sufficiency concept, believing that you could just have one product in one country. You need to have choice of treatments for patients, and you need to have both unpaid and paid plasma donors. So I've decided to show you also the PLUS call to action, just to show you the type of issues that I think unite us all within PLUS. You can see that diagnosis, access to care, but also equal treatment levels, because we are very aware that depending where you live, even in a region like Europe, depending where you are, your access to medicinal products or to alpha-1 antitrypsin therapy will be very different. And it's exactly true for hemophilia, it's exactly true for PID. The recognition that plasma products are unique medicinal products, the value of having strong patient groups, the importance of registries, of reference centers, the value of having national rare diseases plans, and the supply of human plasma are all issues that we agreed within PLUS involve all communities directly. And you can see this call for action. It's actually a living document. So we keep going with this call for action to new policymakers, and this is how we get political support for our viewpoints in Europe. So we also work increasingly with A+, and obviously we've got John in the room who is a member of A+, and we've realized that for some of our topics, it's actually much better to have an international collaboration. We've been actively involved with the Alliance of Blood Donors Organization on a project that looks at the risk-based decision-making around blood and plasma products, and I will not go through all the details, but this is another example of where Plus and A+ can collaborate successfully together. Another development is the Rome Declaration, and some of you may have heard that last year this document really created a bit of a scandal in the community. This was a declaration with the WHO logo on it. It came out of a high-level meeting of policymakers during the World Health Assembly, where it is stated in the document that voluntary non-remunerated blood donation is the only safe and reliable option for collecting blood and producing plasma products. And the document goes further in actually recommending countries to phase out compensated plasma donations and products made from plasma from compensated donors. And obviously, again, this was the perfect example of taking decisions with actually no due regard to the rights and to the viewpoints of the patients. None of us were invited to take part in the discussion. And as you can imagine, we took strong action after that. We wrote to WHO. They actually removed the logo from the declaration. And just next Tuesday, it will be the next step, because I will be meeting with Brian O'Mahony and Mark Skinner with the WHO in Geneva to make sure that this doesn't happen again and that we move towards a patient-centered policy on this issue. So again, there you see that WHO, international organization with an international impact, and Plus and A+ working together has really made a difference. I'll briefly mention the fact we work also with other stakeholder organizations like the rare diseases community. And then I wanted to mention this particular example that we have from the PID community, where in 2005, or 2003 actually, the WHO, in its immense wisdom, decided that immunoglobulins should no longer be on the list of essential medicines that they produce every 2 years. And the reasons that were given for this were actually they were not rooted in science, they were not rooted in evidence, and they were very misinformed decisions. And so the whole community, it was a scandal. Everybody reacted on their side to ask to reinstate immunoglobulin, and I see I'm running out of time. Unfortunately, it didn't work. So what we decided to do was to all get together and to have a unified approach. And we got with the doctors, we got with the nurses, we got together with all our national patient organizations, with industry, with every single stakeholder that has a stake. And we prepared a common submission that was about 65 pages long with all the proper references, all the proper data. And we asked for an audience with the committee of WHO that deals with essential medicines. And after doing all that, immunoglobulins were reinstated in the list. And to this day, this is the only time it's happened with WHO. So the question is whether alpha-1 antitrypsin should be in that list next. But that's another example of how working together has really paid off. I will be mentioning that in another presentation, but at the international level, we also have our Primary Immunodeficiency Week, where we work with all the stakeholders, and that has enabled us to really increase the visibility of PID at the global level. And I don't know whether in the alpha-1 community you have a week or a day at the moment. You do, okay. And this for us has been really, a very good momentum every year to create better visibility. We've also just published this publication on principles of care. And very briefly, this document is not a clinical guideline. It's actually a political document that outlines what should be the key elements in place in any given country if you want to reach gold standard care for PID. So that's an extremely powerful political tool for us that we are using increasingly. And it was prepared with the input of experts from all over the world. So it carries a lot of weight. It was published in the leading journal in immunology, Frontiers of Immunology. And we are now already seeing the impact this document has because it's being used in many countries. They're using it in Malaysia at the moment to advocate for better reimbursement, better access to certain treatments for PID. And just so you know, we actually got inspired by the hemophilia community on this. So maybe that's another example you could reflect on because they have done it successfully. We're very happy with this approach, which again is a stakeholder joint approach, and maybe it's worth looking at it for Alpha 1. So just so you know, we work with many other agencies where we are officially represented, and they are listed here. I won't go through all of them. But for example, we do have a seat with the European Medicines Agency, and we work with the FDA in the US and so on. So in conclusion, I think it can be said that stakeholder collaboration is really pivotal to increase the awareness around Alpha 1 and advocate for better access to care. And it's definitely based on our experience, we know that through collaboration with all stakeholders, we've been able to ensure that our community's voice has been heard, that our priorities have actually been heard but acted upon, that we've made a change, that we've had an impact, and that our messages were delivered successfully. And ultimately what that will do is that it will actually improve the conditions for people who live every day with their condition. And I hope that in this presentation I gave you a flavor of how we see the value of working closely with our stakeholders. And obviously we'll have some time for discussion later on, and I'll be happy to take questions then. Thank you very much.